So let's get started making our card. As I was designing this, actually making the cuts, I made a few changes and kind of played with it. So I just want to show you what I did first of all. This is an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. I cut it down the middle here at 4 1/4 inches. And then that gave me an 11-inch by 4 1/4 inch card. I scored it down the middle. Actually, I just folded it and used my bone folder. We'll talk about that in a minute. Now, I want you to notice here I have this little smudge on it, and that's from when I was doing some stamping on the back. But I decided to leave that on the front because it'll be covered up. No one will ever know, and I don't have to waste a piece of cardstock. On the back, I did take my little homemade, it says homemade just for you by, and then it's blank, stamp, and I just used my black Excelsior ink pad and stamped that, and then I'll just sign it right here with my name. And there's my little personalization to the card. Easy, quick. So the first thing, I did several things that I want to discuss with you. For the inside of the card, I like to do something on the inside of my card. It just gives it a little more finished look. I cut this piece of paper, just a piece of purple paper, at 5 1/4 inches tall by 4 inches wide. And then I took this EK Success punch and punched it. Now here's a tip that I learned while doing this, because I had lots of frustrations. This is thin paper, more like the consistency of copy paper, even though it's printed or it's colored to use for scrapbooking. It's too wimpy of paper to run through here alone. It works much better if you do at least 2 sheets or if you use cardstock. Otherwise you're fighting with it through the whole thing. But let's just start with this. This is just going to go on the inside of the card. Just pull out the ATG gun here. And this just gives us a nice little finished look on the inside of the card. I just eyeball it and center it, and it's not exactly straight, but I used enough ATG that if I pick it up it's going to be off, so we'll just leave that like it is. Okay, and then the next thing that I did is I made the beginning, the frame. This is a little bit different color purple. And I used the Elegant Edges cartridge like we talked about, and when I went back, originally when I talked, I wasn't sure if I was going to use the dots frame or the loops frame, and I really like the loops kind of better, but I was having a little bit of difficulty cutting that, and with my, I think it's time for some new Cricut blades, so this one just cut a little cleaner, a little bit neater. So I cut this using, it's on page 34, the dots, using Elegant Edges, and I cut it at 5 1/4 inches, and that gave us this nice little frame. Then I took my Happy Birthday stamp that I showed you earlier from Stampendous. It's actually 2 stamps that I had to put on my acrylic block, and I just used my black Excelsior ink pad because I felt like that's what would show up the best, and I stamped it right in the top right here. I centered it on my acrylic block so that it would look a little bit, so it would spread across and be placed just where I wanted it. And then what I did is I took my Cuttlebug and I used a Swiss Dots embossing folder and I ran it through my Cuttlebug. Now, I debated, I looked at it both ways. I almost think I would have liked it better without the Swiss dots. I went back and forth, and finally I just decided to throw them on there, because if you remember, the printed paper that we're using at the bottom has little yellow polka dots in the background. So I just thought, well, I'm just going to do it. You could do it either way. I think it would look great with, it would look great without, so whatever you prefer. And then I cut this little piece of paper 3 1/8 inches wide by 1.5 inches tall. So let's just use our ATG. We're going to stick that right down. And you'll see once I chose all my colors and made all my cuts, these are pretty easy to and quick to assemble. It doesn't take very long at all. Now I'm going to go ahead and adhere this to the card now. And with those Swiss dots, I'm very generous with my adhesive. Well, I am anyway, but especially when I'm using the Cuttlebug, because with the extra dimension, I just want to be sure that it's going to stick and not come up, especially if this is a card that is meld. I just want it to be really well stuck. So we have happy birthday and then our little piece of printed paper. So then I went ahead, like I told you earlier, and I used my Kate's ABCs, and I used this picture. Sorry about that. I used this picture on page 69 as my main cut. And so I cut it, I ended up cutting it at 2.5 inches, and I did all of its layers. So this is the main picture with the flowers, and I did that in the green. Basically all you'll see of it is the stem and the leaves. And then I did the picture, and then I did the center of the flower and with the gold and the pink, and the center of the flower was with the same gold as what one of the tulips is, and then the flower itself is in this little red. If you notice here, I've just pulled different colors from in my pattern paper to print it. So let's put this together real quick. I decided for some added dimension, I would use my Tim Holtz tea dye ink and just lightly brush around the edges of just the picture. I'm not doing the flowers, I'm not using anything but just the picture. It just gives it just that little bit extra dimension, and I'll set that aside. And then earlier I talked about using glue, but I decided instead, just to save time, to run it through my little Xyron Create a Sticker. I call it the Xbox. I doubt that's the right word for it, but it's very simple to use, gives it really good strong adhesive. Once it's on, you have a few seconds to maybe kind of shift it a little bit, but once it's on, it's really on there well. So we'll just put that, we'll just start layering up our picture. Layering, here's the green. And then this is the yellow, the kind of gold layer. Be really careful with the leaves because they are very, very delicate. And the stems, there's not a whole lot of bulk behind them, and it would be very easy to just pull the head of the tulip right off. So I just layer. This cartridge really layers beautifully. Some of them you have to work a little harder to layer them, but this one I found layers very, very beautifully. So now we have our little picture here. I think it's kind of pretty. And I didn't want to just set it on the card. I wanted to give it just a little bit of extra dimension. So I pulled out my foam squares here. I don't even know what brand they are or where I got them. But I just thought it would be nice if this was just kind of popped up from the card. So for stability, I actually put a foam square on the back of each tulip. And then I just put 3 on the base of the picture. So just get all these little, as much as I like foam squares, I don't like the little plastic things on the back. They're a little more difficult to get off. Okay, so there we have it. And I just centered it right there. Now, in the original plan, this would have been the end of the card, and I just felt like it was missing something. Either here or here, something could go. So I went back looking at Kate's ABCs, and on page 55, let me just pull that page, I found all these little butterflies, and I thought, oh, that'll be pretty. It kind of goes with the flowers. So what I did is I used, this is the base cut, and I cut it in brown at 1 inch, and then I just chose the wings for one of them, and I cut it in brown at, or I mean in the red, the same red that this flower is right here, also at 1 inch. And then I layered them together, again using my Xyron. I just thought it would give it a little extra punch. Now, just a quick tip here. If you notice, I have lots of little brown ones right here. I don't throw things away. I could have used these other cuts and layered and done all the little butterflies and dragonflies that are in here. But all I wanted was the single butterfly. So what I did is I saved my brown, my leftover brown, and I have this little bowl that I keep some of these extra little cuts. Some of these are, you know, the negative space, extra flowers that I mistakenly cut. And I just set them here, and someday if I need them for packaging, I will just use them for packaging, you know, adding a little confetti in it. Now, I didn't want to just have that flat on the card, but because the body is so narrow, a foam dot I would have had to cut, and it was just too big of a problem. So what I did is I went into my stash and I found these mini glue dots. I don't even know who makes them. Glue Dots International. I just found these mini glue dots, and they're just teeny tiny dots, and they're clear. I really like these if I'm putting bulky items on a page or on a card, but I'm just going to put that right as close to the center as I can of my butterfly, and then I'll just kind of play with it so that you don't see it from the beginning. And it's a really strong adhesive. I've adhered buttons with it. I've adhered ribbon, little tiny bows with it, and it does a really good job. But then now what I'm able to do, since that adhesive is just in the middle, I can just kind of raise up that wing and raise up that wing, and we have our finished card. So the card is done. I am happy with the way it turned out. So now it was time to get it all packaged, and I like to add to my envelopes. This is the envelope I found, I just picked up at Joann's, and I wanted to add something to it. So I pulled out my Cuttlebug folders, and I found the Happy Birthday Cuttlebug folder. And what I really wanted, I'm going to put some colored paper here so you could see it. I really wanted to just have this Happy Birthday, kind of maybe the flowers on the flap. And I couldn't figure out how to do that. So if any of you know how to do that, that would be great. I would love for you to leave a comment and let me know exactly if there's a way to do it, so that I don't have all this other stuff on my flap. So since I couldn't do that, what I did is I took my envelope I opened out the envelope and I put the flap inside the Cuttlebug like that, so that the back is on the outside and it won't be embossed. And then I used my normal A and my 2B plates and ran it through, and then ended up, I don't know how well it shows on the video, but ended up just with all these little happy birthdays throughout here. And so that's the back of my envelope. So then I have my little plastic cellophane bags, and we'll just pop that inside. And then, of course, we have to have a topper. So I took a piece of the cream cardstock, the same cardstock that the base was made out of, and I cut it at 4.5 inches one direction and 5.5 the other direction. And then we'll grab the Martha Stewart scoreboard. This is probably one of the best tools. I really like this tool. So since it's at 4.5, I want to score it at 2 1/4. It just creates such nice creases. Just flatten it out, and there's my little topper. So then I took my Cricut Imagine More cartridge. That's the one that just comes with the Imagine. And I went to page 27, and I found this little flower border. And I cut it without the layers. I just cut it as a single cut. And so just this one right here. And I think it was probably cut at about 1.5 to 2 inches. I just kind of looked at it at the board and said, yeah, that's the size I want it, and went with it on the little mat. So this is what I ended up with for my cut. And it's just these little flowers, and I thought that was kind of fitting. And again, I just ran this through the big Xyron. I have the Xyron 950, and I just ran it through that. And it was too long, but that's okay because I have a plan for that. So I just kind of centered that right on the center of my topper and smooth that out. And then with the leftover, I opened out my folder and just bent it back over the edge. Then it just is kind of continuous there. This part right here is kind of hanging off, and I didn't mind that at all. I just left it. And then I centered it over my card here. Grab the Tim Holtz Tiny Attacher. Now this is the kind of tricky. You want to be sure you don't catch your card or your envelope. What I love about this Tiny Attacher is it makes such tiny staples that I don't worry about covering it. They're hardly noticeable. And then we have our card. So I hope you enjoyed that project. It was a lot of fun. It took me a while to decide exactly what I was doing. But I really had fun doing it, and I like the way it turned out, and because I like purple so much, I'm really happy with it. I think if you wanted to and you had a little bit of extra time, you could do some stitching around the edges on the outside of the card base. It would look really pretty. I've just kind of run out of time. So I will get these delivered to my card swap, and hopefully soon we'll have a post and you'll get to see all the cards that were made by the other members of the card swap as well. So thanks for watching, and come back and look at more later.